Hi, this video is going to cover section 1, 2, and it's basically operations on real numbers is what the title of this one is. So operations on real numbers. Operations: add, subtract, multiply, divide. Real numbers are anything, fractions, decimals, negatives, positives, any kind of number that you see. So let's look at the first thing that you should really know by now, and that's adding or subtracting with, or I guess any operation with integers or negatives. So this is just a quick reminder for you of, oh my goodness, how do I add, subtract, multiply, and divide with negatives? So let's start with the rules for adding and look at those. So adding, the general rule is to, or if, I guess there's two general rules. All of a sudden I was drawing a blank here. So let's do the first rule. If they have the same sign, if same sign, add and keep the sign. Okay, the next rule would be if they have a different sign, one's negative, one's positive, or if different signs, subtract, and then keep the sign of the larger number, and keep sign of larger number. Okay, so that does not look like a number, but doesn't look like an E and R. I did not write that word so well. Anyway, so let's look at some examples of adding. So these are our two rules. If they're the same sign, keep the sign and add them. If different, subtract, keep the sign of the larger one. So if we have something like 2 plus 3, well, they're both positive. By now, you're probably pretty good at this one. We would get positive 5. But what happens if they would have been both negative? And this could have been written with the parenthesis around the negative 3. Some books write that, some don't. But what am I going to get when I have negative 2 and I add negative 3 more? And I get negative 5. So I got to add up all my negatives to get negative 5. Goodness, another example would be something like, well, what if I have 4 and I add negative 7? And again, the parenthesis could be around that negative 7, but I have 4 and I add negative 7. That means you need to subtract them because they're different signs, and then keep the sign of the larger one. So this is positive, this is negative. Subtract them, you get 3. And then what should it be, positive or negative? Well, the larger number is 7 and it's negative, so you're going to have negative 3. So you could think of it as, well, if I have negative 7, I know that's larger, and if I subtract them, I can see I still have negative 3 there. You can do these or think of them on a number line as well, right? And if you're at the first number, so like let's look at number 2 where I was at. Let's go 0, 1, 2. Here's negative 2, 1, 2. Okay, 3, 4, 5, negative 5. Just a couple dots on that. So let's look at number 2. You start with being at the first number. So I'm going to start here. So think about this as my starting place. And I want to add negative 3 or take away 3 more. 1, 2, 3. And you'd get to the negative 5. And if you think about this problem, you're going to start at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to add negative 7 or move negative 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that would land you at the negative 3 right here. So either way, you can kind of think of it on a number line if you need to. I always tell people, you know, you face forward like you're starting at 0. Here's a little guy and he's facing forward. Smile, hair goes this way at 0. and he will move from the first number, he will move forward, or he'll turn every time he sees a negative. This is actually harder than I thought to explain this method on using this method instead of in person. But so, like for example, if you start at 2, he starts facing forward and he only turns around backward for any negative sign. So from 2, he would just move up 3 and get to that 5 mark. For this problem, number 2, he would start at -2. He starts facing this way, but the second he sees this sign, he flips around and then goes 3 this way. Anyway, my little guy only flips around. It's a little trickier when we get into the subtraction and it's double negative, and then I can show you that again. So adding, these are all the scenarios you're going to see is opposite signs subtract, keep the sign of the larger, both the same signs kind of scenarios. Let's look at subtract. And if you're subtracting, the rule that I like to follow is change the problem to addition and follow the addition rules. So change to addition and follow your addition rules. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look. What if I have 2 and I subtract off a -3? So it's a double negative in a row. Sometimes you'll see a parenthesis around that one. Again, depends on the book. So it's a double negative in a row. Some of you go, oh, that's a positive. Great, it is. But the rule for subtraction is you can actually change the sign of the subtraction and change the sign of the second number and follow the addition rule. So this problem changes subtraction to addition, then change the sign of the next problem or next number, and this is the same problem as this. So 2 plus 3 is still 5. Double negative makes a positive, however you want to think of that. Another problem, maybe I have -7 and I want to subtract off 3 more. This problem really confuses a lot of people. It's most commonly messed up in the more advanced problems. -7 and I minus 3 more. I'm going more into the negatives. If you could think of that without this switching, that's fine. But let's think about what our rule says. It says change this sign to a positive and change the sign of the next number. So you can see both numbers really are negative, so you add them and keep the sign. So it's going to be -10. Right? So another scenario you might see like -10 minus a -2. So similar to the first problem I did, but -10 minus a -2. So you have to change the sign of the subtraction and change the sign of the other one, or the double negative becomes a positive. So this is the same as this problem. -10 plus 2, so they're opposite signs, so subtract, that'd give us 8, and then keep the sign of the larger number. The larger number was 10, so it's -8. And why am I going over this? Because this is what most people mess up in the harder problems, and therefore throws you off for the whole semester. So if you remind yourself again before we get into the more advanced problems, how do I add, subtract with negatives? How do I multiply, divide? And all those kind of things, then you'll be better off for the whole entire semester. So let's see. Multiplication and division. So you got to remember for multiplication and division both that if they're the same sign, if they're both negative, I guess, or then it's going to be a positive. So same sign, the answer is positive. Okay, different signs, the answer is negative. Oops, negative. Okay, so same sign, answer is positive, different sign, answer is negative. So I'm running out of room on this piece of paper, but I'm going to try to finish these problems. Well, let's look. So if I have 3 times -4, are they the same signs or are they different? They're different. So one's negative, one's positive, so our answer would be -12. Had those been the same sign, like -3 times a -4, then we would have had +12. So double, they're both negative, it's going to be positive. So let's look at those for division. We typically write division as a fraction. So if I have -10 divided by -5, what am I really saying? It's a negative divided by negative, so it's a positive. So 10 divided by 5 is 2, and it would be positive because they're both negative. Okay, so be careful of that. If you put your answer in, even if it's a reduced fraction as a negative over negative, my math lab will count you wrong. You have to convert those. If they would have been any other opposite, so let's try 20 divided by -2. I could have written it this way or as a fraction, but you do typically see them as a fraction. One's positive, one's negative, so it's going to be a negative answer, and 20 divided by 2 is -10. Okay, so just a quick reminder, multiplication division, that's not what most people mess up. The rest of this section I am going to let you do on your own. They do talk about fractions, and I really feel like by now you probably know fractions. So the rest of it's just a review on fractions that you should be able to do on your own. All right, and this was all over section 1, 2.